Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. These are of the order of 20 minutes long, so aim to be short and punchy. So if you have any questions on the topic, get them in now and I'll pick them up via the comments. And if you think of any questions on the way through, again, do get them in as soon as possible because the various software streams, etc., they take a long time to get through. So today's topic is the ethics of data, and our expert for today is Nicholas Shearer. Hello, Nicholas.
Hi there. How's it
So
going?
it's an in well, it's a deliberately short and it's not misleading, but it's a big topic. So what's really different at the moment about the ethics of data as opposed to what we've had over the past few years, which is the GDPR compliance? That's all people have thought about. So what's happening now, and what are the big issues?
So I think mainly the big issue at the moment is the public scrutiny that ethics is under, that there is an expectation from the public because AI is so popular and so public in its use now and so accessible to general members of the public, that people are saying, is this good data? Is it data that comes with the consent of the people whose data it is? Can you say where that data has come from? Is anyone suffering because of this data, whether that be commercially because their data is stolen from them, or it may show up personally identifiable information? So I think that's the scrutiny that everything is under now, and that's why ethics has come to the forefront. There's been degrees of acceptance of ethical responsibilities with various companies, but as with most things from a technology point of view, with data and end-to-end use, manipulation and governance of data, the public tend to not really see that. They only see the stuff that gets to them. So with AI, ChatGPT and DALL-E and various AI technologies for text, images, and other things, the public are much more aware. You mentioned the legal aspect of that, and I think prior to ChatGPT and other things coming out, the public was aware of GDPR and to some degree what that meant for them, that it was an attempt to handle PI information or their personal information and secure it in some way, give them some rights over it, so that if they wanted to ask someone what data they had on them, they could do that. There was a mechanism and a fine if they weren't doing things correctly. And equally, if they wanted a third party to look at that data or wanted to retract or remove or delete their data, they had that ability as well. However, GDPR, CCPA in California, PIPL in China, there's various legal frameworks that are mandatory for companies that deal with data. But that's not an ethical decision as such. It's an ethical failure. The reason that these things exist is because companies were quite blasé with their attitude over data, especially where it involves people's own information. So they needed to be put in place to handle that ethical regulation gap, if you like. And that's a good way of thinking about it, that you think about systems like GDPR as a legal minimum, a mandatory minimum that you need to think about within, hopefully, some wider ethical thinking that you do as a company. And that doesn't seem to really be the case just now. The GDPR is, because it's a legal minimum, it's dealt with fairly seriously. And the wider ethical thinking of data sets, data sources, where we get data from, and other ethical considerations are less important and treated separately, often by separate teams that deal with data in general. Yeah.
The other thing that just went across my mind was it's fairly easy if a company has data regarding you, and you want to see it, edit it, remove it, delete it. But what happens with various AIs that are combining data about you to generate new things about you that you don't even know exist?
So back to the public visibility of data, when you're talking about GDPR and where it affects the public, it's data that's stored about you that can be, or that is accessible, is recorded, is used for something. And the ethical conversation you have is backed by that legal framework that says, yeah, you need to control this data. As a controller, people need to be able to retract all the rest of it. That's really at the end of the end-to-end data journey, if you like, that you've got that data somewhere that you're using it for your reporting, your advertising, to send them unsolicited emails, whatever it happens to be, and they have a direct link through GDPR enforced mechanisms to make you do something about that where they are not happy. It's very different for AI. We have to take a step away from GDPR conversations and think about data as a whole, that you've got individual data sources for data that's either created internally, that's externally bought in the case of something like ChatGPT and other large language models, it's bought in as a black box. You don't really know how that data was created other than what they tell you. And if there is any information in there that is PII or is proprietary, with the weights assigned to the front end for ChatGPT, for example, you might not be able to get that out, might not be able to get that information back where it's personally identifying individuals, basically. So the bigger question there for ethics of data in AI is looking at the data sources, which is never something that the end user or a member public sees. It's, as a company that deals with large amounts of data, do you have a system to an ethical framework to think about the integrity, the quality, and the consent, and everything around the data sources that you do use? Like I said, whether it's internal, external, or you've bought it in as a large language model, as a present and current example.
So in a way, I'm trying to think of an analogy that makes sense to me, and maybe to other people. And it's a bit like, so it's a little bit like say the nuclear industry, where we know there's nasty stuff, but we trust the industry to have the procedures and the techniques in place to handle it, but we shouldn't be unduly worried as long as those procedures are in place.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, to extend that point, the GDPR front end is where the public really interact with any ethical decision making or understanding around data. They don't see that back end or those back end decisions. So yeah, there's an element of trust that companies are dealing with data ethically. We know that's not the case. Most of the time, the public is aware of what happens and how data is sourced and how it's manipulated and how it's stored and moved, because there's a breach or there's a cyber attack and they don't handle it, or the ICO put in or give them a fine under GDPR rules, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's an element of trust, but there's very little demonstration of why you should trust those companies, and that's whether it's public sector or private sector, or even third sector for charities and so on.
So, given that we've recently had Rishi Sunak's AI summit here in the UK or whatever, are people? Well, it seems to me fairly obvious that he didn't really understand the problem anyway. But are those sorts of events going to help people, or are they going to, in some way, scare people?
It should scare people a little bit, but there's a huge benefit in the public seeing through mechanisms like GDPR and the fines given out and the chats like the AI Summit and so on. to keep that at the top of the public conscious, so they can then say this isn't good enough. We should be doing better. We don't want to see yet another ICO fine for a GDPR breach as the first our first awareness of things that are going wrong in the industry. It would be nice if corporations and public sector got ahead of that with a much clearer vision of what we do with data and why. And beyond just PII information, it's always a bit of a misnomer, I think, to concentrate on PII, personally identifiable information within GDPR, because anything can be publicly identifiable. I mean, if you've got the only white car on a particular postcode of 100 houses, then those two data points would be enough to identify you, the postcode and the white car. So you really need to, or it really needs to be obvious to the public that something is done at a company level, at a government level around regulation on data handling in general. And not just for people, for every point of data is going to have a direct or indirect effect on people or customers or staff or someone in society. Otherwise, what's the point of the data?
What I want to know is how did you know? How did you know that we had a white car? That's very, very spooky indeed. Yeah, as with all of these things, are there any publicly, I suppose, available examples of who the good guys and bad guys are?
Yeah, it's ever changing. You can approach it from, say, ICO fines for GDPR breaches. There's plenty of those. They're very poor at enforcement, but that's the negative, pessimistic side of it. There's companies that do engage with corporate social responsibility or ethical frameworks specifically and publish those. But even with that, sometimes they'll say, well, this is our ethical framework, and you look at it and you find out really it's just coverage for GDPR. It needs to be a bit more. I do need to get a list together of just all the moving parts of that, because I think it's up to me as someone works in this area, I think, to try and encourage companies to be more forthright with what they're doing, so that we can point out to them as technologists in this area that they fall short compared to other companies that are doing it better.
So imagine that we knew somebody that had a startup company, and they say, I really want to make sure I get on top of all this. What would they actually need to do? Because we all know about business plans and all the rest of it for the business side of a business. But all of these other things, I mean, now there's so much stuff, corporate social responsibility, and now data. What do people have to do first?
I think for me, it's fairly simple. I mean, there's nothing wrong with starting with GDPR, because that explains a lot of the ins and outs of data and handling data. But that really needs to be part of a wider data governance thing. Now, if you're a small company, it doesn't need to be a huge amount of effort with roles assigned to multiple people across multiple disciplines. You just won't have them in a small company. But there needs to be a data governance, some data governance thinking that includes ethical decisions around data quality, data movement, data at rest, etc., that includes or makes easy the GDPR stuff. I'll always say this, but when GDPR came out, a lot of companies complained about how difficult this was going to be to implement, how much it was going to cost them. And I've generally found that that's because they didn't really have a handle on their data. They didn't really have a robust data governance process that understood what data they had, how they dealt with it, what retention they might have had on it, and how they disseminated it out to people at the end of the process in reports or interaction with that data. Because they didn't have a handle on that, GDPR is obviously then difficult. The people that didn't complain about GDPR so much, the companies where much better at that. And I think you have to start there. Look at data governance, your data management function, if you like, that deals with data governance and all the moving parts within that. So GDPR is just one side of that, but that's explaining all of your data sources, all of your databases that you're using, all of your pipelines, all of your reporting technology, all of your access to that in order to understand and document and catalog the data that you deal with. And that's all it's about. If you take GDPR out of it and say, we just need to handle in this one team our legal requirements, you're really not helping. It's the bigger picture you think about. And ethics is just an easy part of that then for every data that certainly you create yourself or buy in. What ethical thinking have you considered for this, and then you maintain that quality of that data all the way through.
So given the fines and things that are available for being unethical and not complying, it would seem to me that just being ethical because it's a good idea to be ethical, it would potentially save you a lot of money, and it's not that expensive.
So that raises a good point. Actually, I was going to mention that one of the problems with companies, especially bigger companies, dealing with that ethical thinking is the disparity or the mismatch between high-level thinking that they might do around corporate social responsibility and ethical thinking from the developers that are actually dealing day in, day out with those data sets and that data movement and that data delivery. Then it needs to be joined. So if you've got a central data governance process that's well organized, you have that written up as part of your strategy at a high level, whether that's corporate social responsibility or a part of data governance with an ethical framework as part of that. That then the developers know that that's there. They abide by that in a completely easy and non-intrusive way. It's just what they do. They're then given the confidence that data sets that they use and data sets that they might promote through a production are considered. They're of good quality, they're catalogued, they're ethically thought over, the PII is identified where appropriate, there is a retention period for that data. If you have that at a high level, then it filters down to the low level, then you're doing the right thing. And it also means whistleblowers, for example, shouldn't be needed at a developer level, because they know first of all there's a quality to your data governance, but also that they are in a structure where they can report their own issues that they have with a way of working, because your data governance already allows for that they can say, okay, this particular data set is maybe not quite what we thought it was. There's maybe a flaw in our process. Let's fix that. It needs to come from the developers as well. Otherwise, you get developers just fighting for data sets and concentrate on just doing the whatever they need to do to get the product out the door as quickly as possible, where the social responsibility, ethical aspect just sits at the top and gets ignored, which is quite common.
It does seem to me that there's in the future there's the possibility. Again, it depends, as you say, whether the governance is correct, but there is the possibility of a whole new type of cover-up. We've had so many cover-ups from, I don't know, locally here. We've had stuff to do with the Hillsborough inquiry. We've had Boris's missing 5,000 WhatsApps, and there's lots of things in between. But the thing that seems to me is that the tighter you sort of regulate something, the more people are looking for the loopholes to get out of it. Which, yeah, hopefully, because this is ethics and we're all ethical, that's not going to happen. But that could happen, though, couldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's easy and not easy at the same time. There's always data governance in companies to some degree. How well organized it is up to individual companies. Tends not to be very organized. it's not easy to do all of this correctly. Everyone needs to be on board. It needs to be part of your strategy to have that all-encompassing high-level data governance that filters all the way through your organization.
Amazing. Well, it is amazing how time flies. These sorts of almost like pub conversations can go on forever. But if anybody out there listening, if there is anybody out there listening, and you want to know more from Nicholas, his details are up on the screen now. We haven't had any questions, so everybody's understood everything perfectly. But if you do want to ask some questions, then you can still go onto the various LinkedIn streams or for this and comment and ask questions there. So, well, thank you for giving us the benefit of your wisdom. I certainly couldn't talk for 20 minutes on the ethics of data. So thank you very much for that. Nice to speak with you. And for anybody else that's out there, these things will be available forever. So you can go back and listen to them at your leisure. So anyway, thank you once again, Nicholas, for giving up the beginning of your lunchtime anyway.
No problem. Thanks
Okay.
so much.
Okay, then bye for now. Well, as I said, thank you very much. There'll be replays posted online, and there should be another one of these before Christmas. So keep your eyes peeled. So for now, goodbye, and see you next time.